Hey YouTube, Space Badger here. I am back again after a long time being effectively on hiatus, recording for you a video about the manga and reviewing the chapter and summarizing the chapter associated with Genshin Impact. Now, I don't know about you, but I've been obsessed with Genshin Impact for the last couple of months. Pretty much ever since I found out about the game, I've been on there playing it every single day. And I could not actually believe how much lore and backstory there was baked into this thing as presently constructed, and keeping in mind that I'm recording this 3 days before patch 1.2 comes out, but there's going to be a patch 1.3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I mean, for the love of God, 1.2 is just going to introduce the third, I think, of 7 regions. So there is not only a lot of lore and story already embedded in the present storyline with all the content we have today, but there's a whole roadmap yet to come, and there's a lot of content there for to discuss, theorize about, like go into hypothetical explorations, journeys, and commentaries on, and that's what I want to do. But what I've also realized, a bit of a crossover, there's a whole manga set on pretty much in a timeline just before the events, except for the prologue, which is what I'm actually going to review for you today, which is set a little bit further in the history books again. But it fills out a lot of the gaps and a lot of the information and a lot of the character history that we are playing through and experiencing as a part of the main story. And I realized that I thought you might find this as interesting a backdrop as I would. So that's what I decided I'm going to do. I'm going to make a video series. It's going to be on the Genshin Impact. I'm going to review all of the chapters for you. So I hope you tune in. I hope you enjoy it. I'm going to explore a bit more about the lore in a bit more of an accessible way. I'm going to try and tie it into the game as much as possible. And the game is going to be here being presented to you as well as a kind of visual aid for things as we come across stuff in the video and the chapters. And if you like that YouTube comment, if you like that kind of thing, if you like this video content, I really encourage you to like, comment, and subscribe. I really need to know if you guys would be into this stuff. I'm still going to do Tower of God as well. It's just Sui's on a bit of a hiatus. So if you're one of the few people who was around to watch that content, then don't worry, it will come back. I'm all set up now. A lot of things have taken place, but because of how much obsessed I am with this game, because there's a manga, because I feel like you guys would be interested in experiencing this manga with me, that's what I thought I'd put together. So in front of me, what you can see is all of the manga channels, the chapters or parts that are out today. I'm going to focus on this specifically for you. This is the prologue. So let's dive straight in. Let's see where we go. Alright, so the opening scene, we start with a fiery red head, much like our Duluth that I've got presenting to you in the game right now, on screen. She's with a little girl who just wakes up coughing, and this woman says, "Don't worry, I'm going to get you some herbs so we can deal with that cough. I'll be right back. Just you try and get back to sleep." And then we get this wonderful panel, which you can clearly see with this fiery red-headed temptress, which is a very nice shot, by the way, is looking over Mondstadt, which you are very familiar with from the gameplay and events of the game's story. And then she looks up into the sky, and she can see there's also something hanging above, looming over the city. And she pulls a dark Jarala face as she looks up at it. She kneels and offers a silent prayer, presumably to the wind god Barbatos, also known as Venti, and prays in silence. And you can see that the little girl is still in the house behind her looking on, didn't go back to sleep. You can see that she immediately realizes she's there and refers to it as Lind. Her full name is actually Linda, and this little girl seems to be a part of the same clan that Luke is potentially a part of, and that this person is. You find out that her name is Vanessa. Now, Vanessa's a big part of the story, or at least she's referenced a lot in the main story of the game. If you'll look at my screen right now, just for a second, this massive tree in the background, which it's just down this part of Windrise in Mondstadt, this is an entire shrine, effectively, to this character. And we see Venti kneeling and praying at this tree at various points throughout the gameplay story. So that's who we're talking about and who the prologue story is going to feature today, which I thought was very interesting. But just to get back to the manga chapter for a minute. And you can tell that they're a bit worried about tomorrow and about the transpires and the events. Linda actually points up to the sky and says Celestia, abode of the gods, which, again, if you don't know much about some of the sort of broader lore regarding Genshin Impact, so Celestia is effectively like the Acropolis or the city of the gods in the Genshin Impact universe. It's where mortals can ascend as well to godhood, which is actually what, funnily enough, ends up happening here. But only under certain circumstances, and only if that individual does something remarkably special to protect the land, and also is blessed with the existing gods. The two gods that are most pervasive in the game at the moment is Venti, obviously. If you've been in from the very beginning of the game and you pulled him, you're very lucky. I did not. That's why I have Sucrose in my team and not a Venti, but that's fine. And also Zhongli, who I do have, who's on the current raid banner now, not for very long, a couple more days left if you want to pull for him. But he and Venti are the two Archons, also known as gods, as you can imagine, in the game right now. Now, there's a lot of special preconditions about being an Archon and about how you can inhabit a mortal body, which I don't want to get into here. I'll have to get into in the future. But just know that when people talk about Celestia, when people talk about gods, there are multiple gods. Not all gods are built the same, and not all gods have the same history. And then there are even people who can ascend to godhood and join the city of Celestia to protect the lands of Mondstadt and Teyvat. And Teyvat's the world that this game is set within, the story is set within. So basically, Linda's worried about Vanessa tomorrow and about what's happening. Vanessa tells her there's nothing to be concerned about, and we get a lovely shot, a very wholesome shot, of course, of Vanessa hugging poor Linda and picking her up. Definitely wholesome. And then we cut away. We cut into Mondstadt, and we see a big Anemo summoning symbol forming just in the forest outside of Mondstadt on the luscious green. And I think for anyone who's played the game, you probably know what's happening here. I don't have it, but if you ever proc Venti Z, this is effectively what happens when he rises up and effectively casts his lifting floating spell. And amongst the summoning circle, the main man, Barbados himself, also known as the wonderful Bard Venti, materializes and states, "How long have I slept?" So, alright, a little bit of talk about Venti for a minute. You know, he's a guy after my own heart, right? Super chill, likes his sleeping, likes to, not be too involved in anything, likes to sing a lyric or two, likes to wander and promotes freedom. And that's the whole history of Mondstadt, right? Like, Mondstadt is the region of freedom, and all of the regions, kind of, their economic and social activity is promoted through and is based upon the kind of gods or their archons' primary identity or identifier or behavior. In Venti's case, it's all around happy-go-lucky, fare-free, that whole whimsy would be a very good word to describe Venti. However, it does also tend to mean that Mondstadt is usually not very well necessarily stable, and he's a bit of a duff god, to be honest, because freedom is amazing as an ideology. In practice, it's very open to, interpretation and even exploitation. So every time Venti sods off, gets too high, passes out for a few millennia or so, he always comes back in Mondstadt's not in a great place, or at least in a worse place than he originally leaves it. He's no Zhongli, who, built an entire 3,000-year history around commerce and economic principles, and literally is known as the god of contracts, which has set Leeway up to be this kind of economic and trade-hosted superpower for across all of Teyvat. Yeah, Venti didn't really do any of that, right? And normally I would have shown Venti, but as I said, I don't have Venti. It's very sad. So I'm trying to show Venti didn't really do any of that, right? So, not the most practical of gods. Venti, don't worry, I still love him. I'm still very jealous of those of you who have him in the game. So but he's risen again in this storyline to once again see what has happened to Mondstadt in his absence. And so we get a bit of a summary. Mondstadt, the crown of the north. In the very beginning, Archon of the winds Barbatos, scattered the snow, clove the mountains, and sowed the grains, allowing his wandering kin to live off the bounties of the land. The wind Archon then imparted his wisdom to the people. They brewed wine, built windmills, and wove the flying wings. He then set aside special festivals and celebrations to give his people joy after days of hard work. Pleased with what he had achieved, the god then took his lyre and set off for the wilderness. And then we get the cover page. Prologue, Songs of the Wind, and that's what I'm covering today. It's the Genshin Impact Manga that you can see on MiHoYo's website. Please support this game. It's a wonderful game. It's an incredible experience, free to play or a whale like myself. It is really a spectacular game. And I'm a bit of a Zelda fanboy, so this game absolutely resonates and I really love it, and I really wanted to explore the lore with you and hopefully give you a little bit of context as you working and wandering and experiencing this wonderful world. Or if you're like me and the first time you played this game you just kind of mashed the space bar and you didn't take the story in too much, these videos are also for you, or at least to enrich your experience while you're playing the game. So a little bit to extend that sort of monologue about introducing Mondstadt. But all that took place thousands of years ago. Mondstadt is now ruled by powerful magnates led by Lord Lawrence. The nobles own vast amounts of wealth and power, which they then use to enslave the people. Yeah, good job there, Benty. The holy days that Barbatos set aside for the common folk are now exclusive privileges of the rich and corrupt. Yeah, maybe I'd sleep for so long next time. But the city also faces external threats. Ursa the Drake. Just to pause for a minute. Dragons are a big feature of the game. You fight dragons, obviously, going through the main storyline and going to continue to do so. The kind of release notes from patch 1.2 are to be believed, and I think it's no secret dragons are a big part of the lore of Genshin Impact. Specifically, this story though does focus on Ursa the Drake, and Ursa the Drake is one of these dragons that is also referred to occasionally in some of the books and lore, the wider lore of the story, as having plagued Mondstadt for a period, and that's the period we're experiencing right now in this manga prologue. And Ursa the Drake has attacked Mondstadt for many years. The magnates know they're safe as they own the means to appease the evil dragon. But recently, the dragon and its demonic minions have become rather active. So, as usual, Lord Lawrence and his magnates have come up with a plan. And you can see Lord Lawrence just kind of sitting there on, presumably, his throne somewhere in Mondstadt, appreciating a celebration that he's probably conducting for his own private affairs, but definitely an antagonist, getting those vibes. Anyway, coming back to Venti, who's wandered and found himself doing bard-like things as he's wanted to do, and I think has wandered into the streets and the market stalls of Mondstadt's city in the South Plaza commercial district, no doubt. And that's for 5 silvers for the bard. And you can see there's an apple trader here who's a little put off by Venti's general happy-go-lucky, and Venti, in fact, even sort of pushes the boundaries a bit of this vendor's amenity by asking if he would be willing to allow him to sing for his supper and for one of the apples that are being sold by this vendor right now. Typically there's 10 coins. He wants a discount if he can sing a good song. And so Venti bursts into one of the songs. How can one sing songs of pleasure in the lands of gnashing teeth? The gods were gone and left no treasure, set for cards of ash and grief. Thus fine songs lack rules for measure, and no dreams do the folks believe. In trepidation the wind still sings, fear not the darkness that evil brings. Feel on your skin the breaths of spring, herald of freedom and the bane of kings. Now forgive me, I don't have as quite as sweet or as high as a voice as Venti's voice actor does in the game. I have to kind of do it my way, but I hope you enjoyed it. And you can also see while Venti is singing through supper that Vanessa, the main protagonist, is buying herbs that are required for Linda. And Venti, in all of his kind of brash bravado, As you can see, a lot of the children and even the disgruntled apple vendor couldn't help but enjoy Venti's little limericks and his beautiful rendition. So he even gets a couple of extra apples. And then Venti uses this newfound relationship to ask a bit about Mondstadt and what's happened in the last few years while he's been asleep and what's happened in the recent history. And the vendor even mentions that actually this evening is the Ludi Hapalstrom, which is basically the festival. So when Venti first liberated Mondstadt millennia ago, or many years ago, this Ludi Hapalstrom, maybe, was basically the Mondstadt celebratory festival that happened every year to celebrate their liberation, their freedom as a nation, and their general kind of ethos in Mondstadt. And Venti then starts recounting the kind of festival that he left happening every single year, where a fair maiden would throw a ball down from above, in this case a cliff, but somewhere in Mondstadt. Whoever would catch the ball would be receive lots of years of good fortune and worth. And it was a bit of a kind of experience for everybody to show equal possibility and fairness for all. And Venti runs off, but upon Venti recounting his rememberings of the Ludi Hapalstrom, the apple vendor kind of cuts him off and been like, hold on, no, that's not the way this works. The lords now manage the whole affair. They manipulate the events. They also don't let anyone else get involved but them. And so you can't cross any of the lords, and you can't cross Lord Lawrence or his son, who is going to be at the Ludi Hapalstrom tonight, and who the ball is going to be thrown for. And Venti kind of cheekily looks over his shoulder and says, but my rhymes can beat even those of Barbados, which kind of humbles the vendor a little bit. And again, it's Venti being very brash. He is Barbados, so I probably will hope he can beat himself. I don't know, I guess that would kind of be Venti's own. Anyway, it's not the point. The point is that Venti slips away in his little godly favor. Okay, and then he finds himself at gatherings just outside the cathedral, which is a very established spot, and you go to there many times in the game, to start watching people gather for the Ludi. And then he starts hearing some of the commoners or some of the other townsfolk talking about the girl who's going to throw the balloon down from this tower, and you can see the tower in that top panel there. That actually the person is chosen and it's a bit manipulated, and that the lords actually take the girl afterwards, and the whole thing's just a setup for basically this lord to do pretty despisable things to the woman as well. So the whole thing is now manipulated. So the lords or the magnates are cherry picking the girls to throw the balls. No one else can touch the ball, even though it was supposed to be about fairness and freedom. Solely the lord can. And the Lord's son specifically is going to pick it up and take it. And so no one else is allowed to get involved. And so then Venti, in a bit of a panic at this point, because he's now realizing that this magnates have really sort of monopolized and taken full control of Mondstadt, which is not Venti's ethos at all, goes and watches the girl. And you can see the girl in the tower, and you can see she's very forlorn, kind of really sad, and throws the ball down in quite a state. And then you see little fat Lord Bastard Lord, or Lord Porkling, as Venti quickly dubs him, which is how I will be referring to him from now on. So Lord Porkling wanders out from the crowd to pick up the ball and get his presumably years of good fortune and wealth, but in expedient Venti fashion, Explore King Venti swoops in, nabs the ball, and starts kind of flexing a little bit, showing off his basketballing twirls and his ability to manipulate and be a slick little devil. He also busts out his lyre and introduces himself as Venti the bard, the traveling musician who's stolen the ball. And Lord Porkling is pretty put off by this. Of course, no one usually is brazen enough, and no one has stood up to them in anything quite so public a fashion before this. And he's quite clearly taken aback and immediately starts saying, "You're just a beggar. I'll consider forgiving me the slight if you give that back immediately. Otherwise," and then he draws his sword, possibly the least intimidating thing that sword that has ever been drawn in Genshin Impact. And says, "You vile knave!" He goes to strike it down, and Venti's just out of there. Like Venti, I mean, I'm assuming this is years and years before, so who even knows what Venti's doing? I'm sure Venti could have crushed him here and then, but that's not really what Venti does, right? He's all about freedom and trickery and movement and exploration. He's the god of freedom, so he's not going to prioritize combat, and he's certainly just not going to squash Lord Porkling just because he could. So he decides to leg it because he thinks that would be kind of more in character, especially as a traveling bard, as he's introduced himself as, and probably runs straight into a wonderful location. I mean, and probably bumps into Vanessa and realizes he's basically just run into a brick wall, telling you a lot about Vanessa, which I'm sure if Venti ran into the Luke, it would probably also be a similar outcome. Very interesting thing about Vanessa, I also want to just point out real quickly. She really looks like a bit of a cross between D-Luke and Kaya. Her skin complexion is clearly that similar to Kaya, or even the more recent characters like Jing'an. So I'm wondering if there's some sort of crossover there, but it's made very, very apparent, and we'll get to this soon, that it's the red hair that's more distinguishing. That's why I'm comparing her a lot to D-Luke. I just also wanted to call that out. And so Venti also realizes very quickly that Vanessa's wrists and her ankle is bound, implying that she's got chains and shackles, so that she's some sort of captive, potentially a slave, which also shocks him because this is extremely anti-Barbados in terms of his well-known doctored views on such things from the past. Lord Porkling catches up to Venti, having bumped into Vanessa, and immediately recognizes her as the Lion's Tooth, or the Lomenjan. My German's not that good, so please correct me down below. And it's interesting that she's called Lion's Tooth, which I also wanted to call out. It's an interesting reference, because there's a Lion's Roar, which is a weapon in the game, and it's also worth pointing out that it does extra damage against Pyro and Electro. Funnily enough, I'm using her in Kaching because I'm building Electro Kaching personally. But I had to point that out. So I'm wondering if this is potentially her weapon, or at least somewhat an allusion to her weapon. We get to deeper in the chapter. We don't see her specifically wielding this, but it would make a lot of sense just based on some of the symmetry in the game. I mean, I'll leave that up on screen. Lord Porkling knows exactly who she is. She's a very well-established arena fighter who's taken down everybody. Again, a god has literally just ran into this woman and referred to as a brick wall. So my guess is mortals don't do very well if she's fighting people in the arena, even if she is a slave. And with Lord Porkling, which of course Vanessa's not going to be a fan of, being a slave most of her life, immediately kind of gives a death stare and prepares to fight to protect what I think she's found her new bard friend. But again, Venti's just eating his way out of there, and he's just floated off, and he's like, I'm out. God, I wish I had it for exploration. Anyway, it's not about that. And he slips off over the houses and runs away, leaving Vanessa, I guess, to deal with Lord Porkling. And so then we cut back, and Vanessa has returned from her expedition, having picked up apples and medicine for Linda, which we saw her doing while Venti was singing. Then she says, you need to look after Linda to other members of her clan. She says she has to leave now and leave Linda in their care. And wanders out back towards the city, and it's the middle of the night, and Lord Porkling has approached, and he has purchased not only Vanessa, but her entire clan, i.e. all of the slaves who are currently under Vanessa's protection, who are under and are now properties of Lord Lawrence and the Magnates. So then we cut across, and we find Vanessa is locked up in a cell. And I assume it's a little bit of a time skip, or maybe it's even that night, who knows. But Venti has also rocked up with some keys, and is doing his typical little humming away, singing to himself as he turns the keys, which I assume that the guard's knocked out somewhere, or floating up, or just floating around, suspended in animation. And so he unlocks the cage and does a little key flick. It's a bit of an extravagant one, but you gotta love him. Anyway, and plops himself right down next to Vanessa, and they do that awkward, and don't do the gotcha, they can't not talk, but, immediately want to start opening a dialogue, and it's very cute. And so Venti jumps in and says, I'll go first. And thanks, Vanessa, for standing up for him this morning, for standing to Lord Porkling, and immediately recognizes her to be a member of the Maratan clan, which is because of her fiery red hair, which again, coming back to D-Luke for a minute, probably means for certain that D-Luke is also a Maratan, which is also very interesting, because we get some nice cool lore bits about how the Lady of Fire, the Touch, who's the god who Venti is referring to, or the Archon, probably responsible for the Maratans from the region, or the native region where they come from. And he also mentions that few are rarely ever seen in the north. So again, if you look at some of the map of Genshin Impact, let me bring that up real quick, there's a lot of the map still to go. But what is also very apparent is that Mondstadt is probably the most northern region. There might be another region here that's like on the similar sort of polarity as, or latitude as Mondstadt, but this is where the ice region is going to be. It's in this, and you can actually see it if you walk to any of these. But there's a long way south to explore. While Leeway covers most of it, you can see it all down here. There's a whole load of stuff which you can pull it all the way. It's almost the same. The distance of Leeway plus some more, all the way down here. So I wouldn't be surprised if one of the map down here is going to end up being the native region, or the Fire region, and be the region where the Maratans are from, and where the Lady of Fire is the Archon and Dominion over that area, or the god in responsibility for protecting it. So I just wanted to kind of point that out for a moment, because that's a nice little tidbit that comes from the manga. And Vanessa's like, what are you on about? Like, Lady of Fire? Who are you? Like, why are you telling me, who are these Maratans? And I think she is familiar with the name Maratan, yeah. She does say Maratan, question mark, so I'm not sure she's even aware of her heritage, to be honest. And then she mentions that her people, for several years, for several generations, have just spent wandering the grasslands, presumably of Mondstadt, as kind of traveling nomads, because they were, I assume, evicted maybe, or something's happened to this southern Fire Nation. That's Fire Nation, Naruto reference. Anyway, maybe no, it doesn't matter. And she says that their entire generation has solely come. And also, just notice the hawk that's just flown in is currently sitting on Luke's line. That's important for later. And all that the elders ever taught her, nothing about the Maratan, nothing about the Lady of Fire or the land they may have originally inhabited, but all they taught them was combat. And that specifically 10 years ago, they were hounded by Hurst of the Drake, who starved them for 4 days as they fled, and presumably killed Vanessa's father and probably several of the clansmen that were wandering the Mondstadt lands and were set upon. So Vanessa is very forlorn at mentioning this tale. Venti's like, oh god, that's a bit tragic. And then that's what Venti typically does, and taps immediately and introduces not only himself, but also Duhimmel, which is his lyre. And he says all the heavens in common tongue. Funnily enough, Duhimmel actually means the sky in German. I just wanted to kind of point that out, but so it's just a bit of linguistic liberties being taken on behalf of the Genshin Impact team and the writers of this manga. And Vanessa introduces herself finally to Venti. Which is funny because he then starts talking about how he's going to start singing songs about her, and she's like, oh, Vanessa's a bit of a hard thing to rhyme with. I don't know what you're going to come up with. And I was trying to think about this before. I was like, Vanessa is pretty hard to rhyme with. Like, a dress? Mama? Like, that's not really particularly good, though. Oh, noblesse. Noblesse oblige. Oh my god, confirmed. Noblesse oblige is Vanessa. No, it's noblesse, or noble. But it'd be funnier if it was noblesse or oblige. That'd be quite funny. There's another little reference. But whatever, moving swiftly on. And they agree that they are friends, which is quite a lovely way for that little dialogue to end. And then Vanessa has a little bit of a flashback to presumably one of the clansmen who was killed by Ursa the Drake. and who talks about Celestia to her, and talks about how anyone who ascends to the halls and dwells in Celestia will become immortal and protect the worlds as one of the gods or one of the archons of Tevat. And this is clearly where Vanessa gets her sort of faith from, and you saw her kneeling in the opening kind of little sequence of this chapter, silently praying, but you can see that she's also a little demotivated, to say the least, because she talks about how the gods did not hear her and how she's lost most people and that they don't seem, no god seems to respond to her, not of course being aware that she is talking to the god of Monstrat as she speaks. Anyway, so Venti again changes tacks because he's a bit weirded out that Vanessa is quite quickly putting dots together. And he says, "There's plenty of time to sing for Celestia. Let's get out of here. Like, let's leave. There's no way that you can stay here." And Vanessa says, "No, I only need to win 12 fights." And presumably she's won a lot of arena fights previously. And so the contract that has been offered to her, given my we're not in leeway, so this contract probably doesn't hold any fucking water whatsoever. These magnets don't really give much of a fuck. But anyway, she just says, "I just need to win 12 fights, and then I win freedom for not only me but my entire clan that the Lawrence family has just purchased, right? The Lords have purchased." And he's like, "Are you insane? We're not in leeway. Like, they're not going to care about you. Just leave with me now. I've got the keys. Everything's fine." She's like, "I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to just claim my freedom. People have told us that before. We don't believe it. You have to fight for it. You have to earn it." And so Venti, although he's a little bemused by this, or is a little put off by this, is also very impressed with sort of her resolve. And so we jump forward again, and fucking Lord Porkling's opening up to Vanessa's cage and saying, "You've got your final fight." So presumably Vanessa's just fucking rolled through fights 1 through 11, just dispatched everyone easily with her. I hope it's with Lion's Roar, I'm not gonna lie. Just go back to that for a minute, but done what she has settled her business and is on to the final fight, except this time it's a bit of a different set of rules. Her entire clan is going to be in the arena with her, and you see a shooting of them all in shackles being shoved through a set of arena gates, and then being pushed through, and Vanessa being the final one as the gate closes behind her, and we get another very wholesome shot as Vanessa is watching the gate close. And then Lord Lawrence announced that her final challenge will be Ursa, the Drake itself. And Vanessa is struck by this. She knows she can't probably defeat a Drake or a dragon in single combat. Certainly not shackled. But regardless, she's throwing a sword. The sword is unfortunately faded out, which makes me very sad. And you also get a little bit of context that behind the walls, which is where all the nobles and where all the lords are watching the arena fight take place from, some of the actual the villagers and the common folk are rioting, basically on the other side of the walls, not on the arena side, saying, "Give her a fair fight." Like, Vanessa is clearly a little bit of the people's champion as well. But Lord Lawrence is ignoring them, doesn't give a fuck about them. Typical, right? And says that he's already struck a deal up. He's struck a deal with Ursa to stop terrorizing them, and if you do stop terrorizing, I'll give you an entire clan of Maratans to devour as a peace offering, effectively. And what I also thought was very interesting is the last little part of this scene, you get some Herschels flying in to support the Drake. So I thought it was very interesting that Herschels seem to be loyal to Ursa in this, in this timeline or in this period of the Genshin Impact history. So you can see that Vanessa is standing in front. She's picked up the sword. She's managing to break out of her shackles. You can see it's a really unfair fight because Lord Lawrence is also shooting arrows from some guards he's got stationed around the outside. So not only is she fighting a dragon, not only is she fighting Herschels, not only is she protecting her clan, but now she's also getting shot in the back, and one of them hits her actually in the chest. As some of the Herschels are flying in, you can see some of her other clans have been pierced and potentially also killed. And so this sends Vanessa into a fucking rage. And you can see Ursa's a little taken aback by this, but she, I don't know, probably she procs her Q and then just starts unleashing hells, just starts slicing Herschel's in parts, kind of progresses, does a massive slash up towards the dragon, and kind of while she's raging, and then you hear, "The hour is nigh, children under the desolate sky." And of course, we know that Venti has arrived in all his Barbados godly glory, which is, it's a really sick outfit, to be honest, which I wanted to throw a little theory in here. I've got a sneaky feeling that as the game's going to progress, that all of the 5 stars, and specifically the Archons, anything that's kind of been banner specific in the game, they'll probably receive upgrades, like as they get closer to their godly form or whatever. And I wouldn't be surprised if you see a Venti version, something like this, with the wing in the all-white apparel being more of that kind of a Nemo-infused, rather than the Bard form, but more of a God form. It's just a little theory. I wouldn't be surprised. You got to remember, it's a gacha game after all. They're always going to add stuff, and then maybe it's not necessarily a whole new character. Maybe it's something you can equip to Venti, which like makes him activate the God form or changes his E, changes his Q or something. I think that would be really interesting as well, in terms of keeping some of the gameplay mechanic fresh. Anyway, putting that to one side, so we see Barbados descend, and Vanessa very quickly puts 2 and 2 together, but not before Venti immediately buffs her, gives her basically a flight, so procs his E, sends Vanessa up, and then she does a striking descending strike, and clearly crits Ursa across the chest, which is pretty fucking sick. It's really, it's frustrating that the sword is blacked out here. It doesn't look like Lion's Roar, funnily enough, even though I've got it presented on the screen, which is really unfortunate to me. Maybe that is Lion's Tooth, and that's a 5-star that will come out in the future. Who knows? But yeah, going back to Luke for a minute, and then Ursa's just like, "Holy shit, that's Barbados. I can't win this. Oh no!" And Venti strikes a pose with the Hummel in his hands, ready to be like, "If you want to stick around, that's fine. You got to deal with a Marauder and a God. You got to deal with me in God form, buffing the Marauder. Her crit rate and her crit damage is about to fucking skyrocket. So you better fuck off." And so that's what Ursa promptly does. Drake leaves. And it's, as I said, Vanessa immediately says, "You're the wind god. You're Lord Barbados." And he says, addresses her by name, addresses her by Vanessa, and once again asks her if he can sing about her and incorporate her in his songs. Vanessa is still lovingly taken aback and says, "Of course, I would love you too." And it's really important, right? Like in the gameplay we currently experience, you know that these two become massive friends because you see at various points Venti talking to her as he is standing, underneath the tree. So if you get to his individual story quest, when he's talking about Vanessa, when he's talking and sort of praying to her, that's who she's talking about. And also, there's also a big reference to her in the loop, which we're coming up to in just a moment. So Venti flies away and says, "Well, you won the deal." And so the deal was, by the way, not only did she get to fight for her freedom, but if she managed to beat Ursa the Drake, Lord Lawrence also bet that he would give up all her titles, all the lands, and all of the sort of lordlings control that he had, dominion he had over Mondstadt. He would give that over to Vanessa. And so Venti kind of floats up to the sort of being on level with Lord Lawrence and reminds him of this little fact, and being like, you better play by the rules, for the gods are no fools. And if Venti, in full Barbados god mode, was threatening you, even if it is in the limerick, you do what he would say, right? Like, so all of a sudden, Mondstadt is effectively Vanessa's, and the Mountains now have a city of safe and peace and freedom is restored. And so there's a lovely little sort of summary of the events. So, "My children deserve the joy of songs and dance, and the right to overthrow vile tyrants. To defend justice and fight against the odious, flame-haired Vanessa found the Ordo Favonius." So we find out that Vanessa was the original founder of the Knights of Favonius, or the Order of Favonius, which you become a member of as the traveller throughout the stories of the game, and who many people who are a part of your team are members of as well. At the end of the saga of flame-haired Vanessa, the gods gave her a seat of Holy Celestine, very appropriate of the which is floated in just then. In other distant worlds, Panga gave his blood to form the rivers and seas. The gods sacrificed Purusha and cut his bodies to pieces, and then fashioned all living beings with those parts. The brain of the giant of Mir became the clouds. Attack of Titans reference. Their sacrifices seeded life in the unliving cosmos. These songs seen of the primeval ones. And so Venti, to just sum up the chapter, is basically recounting the events of the creation of Teyvat and what happened, and how various archons, when they ascend to Celeste, often manifest in some sort of godly form and look after and protect the lands from there on out. And we see, and in the dichotomy into while Venti is talking about his history, probably with these other archons, with these gods that they created Teyvat, through one of his songs, you see Vanessa ascending into Celeste and becoming an archon, becoming a god herself. And her manifestation is none other than the hawk. A hawk, in fact, that I believe, and many people believe, is the hawk that Diluc is frequently discussing with, or at least acknowledging. And so Venti is amazed at her manifestation. There it is, in fact, and is happy to know that Vanessa is looking after Monstrat, presumably for all time. And the final page of the chapter, you see cutting away probably to the present timeline, to the timeline of the story, where you can see that Venti is recounting to the male version of the Traveller the story of he and Vanessa, which I think is a lovely way to end it, and to tie it all back into the original game. So that's it. That's the end of the prologue. This was a really long video, to be honest, but I really hope you enjoyed it. Like, comment, subscribe, do all that stuff. I'm going to try and make the whole series if you like it, if you like this. I want to really promote the lore of Genshin. I want to play Genshin, so I'm going to be making these videos. I'm also going to be streaming on YouTube while I'm playing through the game myself. On that note, I am, just to give you some context, level 49, so I'm playing this game quite a lot. So I'm just about to hit AR 50. I have definitely whaled a fair amount. So look, my gameplay is definitely going to be for those who are on a budget or in some and are willing and are investing in this game actively, because that's how I'm going to be playing this game. But because I'm very fortunate to have that financial freedom. But this is what I want to do. I don't want to work necessarily my full-time job for the rest of my life. I want to do this because I'm really passionate about this. I'm really passionate about that game, this lore, this manga series. And I hope maybe I've inspired a little bit of that passion in you too. So come join us. Space Badger, love you, peace.